Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, your favourite slow TV radio podcasts from the meeting point for students of English, not only in Bilbao but throughout the world. This week our topic of conversation was nature, and coming up in this programme we have some phrases that appeared in this week's conversations. We have some interesting vocabulary that is all related to trees. We also have a little bit of what's the difference? We have a few pronunciation things to look at. Of course, we have celebrity guest speaker. And we have an interesting quote of the week. So first, let's look at some of the phrases from this week's conversations. The first one is to get back to nature. Get back to nature in the sense of returning to where we came from. So when we escape from the city to go and walk in the woods or up the mountains, it is to get back to nature. In the middle of nowhere. This is the phrase that we use for when we are in a very remote place that is completely disconnected from the rest of the world. In the middle of nowhere. Off the beaten track is another phrase. We've often seen this when talking about tourism, when you want to escape to those places where most of the other tourists don't go. So the beaten track obviously is the track that everybody follows. So you go off the main path and you go to the very remote places. You get off the beaten track. And to recharge your batteries is another nice phrase for why we need to escape to the country sometimes, is to recharge your batteries. Obviously that's a metaphorical one. There is a real one. If you want to plug in your telephone, that might be to recharge your batteries as well, in the more literal sense. Escape from the rat race. We often use this phrase, the rat race, referring to urban life, the stress of working and commuting and getting stuck in traffic jams and deadlines and all these things that we have to put up with in our day-to-day lives. That's called the rat race. So sometimes if you escape to the country, go and live in a little village, you can escape from the rat race. The concrete jungle is another phrase that people use to describe the urban environment, because it has a jungle mentality sometimes, but it is a concrete jungle. An invasive species. We were talking about animals or plants that are not native, and sometimes they come from another country and they take over because there are no natural predators, or you might get a plant like a Japanese knotweed that grows and there's nothing here that will actually eat that plant. But I suppose in Japan it has lots of things that eat it. So it's an invasive species, along with many fish and crayfish and lots of other things are invasive species. And finally, totally inedible. Edible is a strange word. Edible means you can eat it. So something is edible when you can eat it and inedible when you cannot eat it. We were talking about seagulls and birds that live on the coast. Any of those birds, like seagulls and guillemots and terns, it seems to me that only the people in the very, very poorest communities in the world will actually eat a seagull. And apparently, I looked on the internet, they are totally inedible. They are stringy, oily, with a very strong flavour. So don't eat a seagull, they are totally inedible. And now let's have some vocabulary related to trees. In this vocabulary, we'll be looking at some words and phrases that have their origins in parts of a tree. The first word is trunk. This is the main part of the tree, the main vertical part. It can also be used for the main part of the human body. You can talk about somebody's trunk. It's not a common expression, and it also gives us the word swimming trunks. The clothes that you wear when you go swimming, if you're a man, the swimming costume is referred to as trunks. And originally it covered all of the main part of the body. That's why they're called trunks. Now they're considerably smaller, but they're still called swimming trunks. So the swimming costume for a man is called swimming trunks. There are also other uses for the word trunk. It is the word we use for the nose of an elephant. That long elephant nose is called a trunk. And it's also used for a very large suitcase. In the old days, when people travelled with a great deal of luggage, they often went with a trunk. The next word is branch. So where the trunk separates into two or more parts, those are called branches. That gives us the phrasal verb to branch out. Usually used in business when you have one business and then you start another business which is kind of connected to the previous one, usually. So if you've got a bread shop and you're selling bread and cakes, then maybe you might branch out into coffee and you might start a cafe which is kind of connected to it. So that would be to branch out, to open another section to your business, usually. So that is the phrasal verb, to branch out. And then we also use a branch for a part of a business. Imagine like a bank where you have the same bank in every town. So you've got Santander in Santander, but you've also got them in Bilbao. That is a branch. So sometimes an office or a shop, which is part of a bigger organization. The one in each town is called a branch. So you have a branch office and a branch manager. The next word is bark. Bark is like the skin of the tree. The outside of the tree is called the bark. You might have seen this word before because it's also used for the noise that a dog makes. Dogs bark. So the expression barking up the wrong tree, that bark is referring to dogs, the noise they make. It's not to do with the skin of the tree. Barking up the wrong tree is an old expression from hunting, where they would chase animals and the animal would run up a tree. If the dogs are at the bottom barking and they're barking at the wrong tree, they've made a mistake. So if we had a problem in the office and you said, I think this is responsible for the problem, and I disagreed, I might say, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. You are mistaken. The next word is twig. Twig is a very thin part of the branch, the last part of the branch. So we're talking in millimeters, a very thin part of the branch. That is a twig. You might remember that there was a model in the 60s called Twiggy. Well, she was very thin. That's why she was called Twiggy. We also use twig for some reason, meaning to realise. I've just twigged what you're talking about, means I've just realised. Or it took him a long time to twig what was happening. So twig can also mean to realise, but I don't know why. Leaf is the flat green part of a tree that does the photosynthesis. It absorbs the sunlight. That's called the leaf. We can also use that sometimes for the page of a book. So again, that will give us a phrasal verb, to leaf through. When you're looking at a book, you might say, I'm leafing through the book. Root is the part of the tree which is underground. So you can get to the root of the problem. which is the basis of the cause of the problem, might be called the root of the problem. You can have your roots somewhere, the place where your family and your ancestors come from. That is your roots. So you can find your roots. You can also put down roots. If you go to live somewhere and settle and raise a family there, you can say, I put down roots there. Become stabilized. And you can also root out something. When you find something that is concealed in some way, you can root it out. There's another phrasal verb. A log is a piece of wood, a piece of a branch of a tree, usually that's been cut at both ends. So it's the kind of thing that you would put on the fire if you're burning wood in your house. Those would be logs. Or maybe they're going to be processed in the paper factory. They might be logs that you see on the back of lorries. You might see log a lot in the computer contexts, to log on and to log off. And the word blog is related as well, but that is from a different log, because a log is also a book, like a diary that they kept on ships. They had a log book where they wrote down everything that happened on board a ship. So that's a different type of log. It's like a record, and that's the origin of the computer log and blog. And there's also the expression to sleep like a log. If you sleep very well, you sleep like a log. Next on my list is stump. If you cut a tree down and there's a few centimetres left on the ground, that is called a stump. And then you can also use the same thing if you lose a leg or an arm. You have a stump. The bit that's remaining is called a stump. And also if you had a pencil and you used it for many years until it's only about 2 centimetres long, you could also call that a stump when all the rest has been removed. This also gives us the adjective stumpy for a little short person. You can call them stumpy. Well, you can if you want to. They might not like it, but that is an adjective. Sap. Sap is the juice, the liquid, the blood of a tree is called the sap. So we could also use that as a verb, especially in phrases like to sap your energy. On a very hot day, for example, it's very difficult to work on a hot day because the heat saps your energy. Bud is a small part of a tree which is in the springtime, and it opens out and either creates a flower or sometimes it creates another branch. That is called a bud. So sometimes you will see this as an adjective, like a budding actor or a budding musician. This would be a young musician who has a promising future, let's say, in the same way as a small bud will grow into a bigger branch or an impressive flower. So this musician or actor, you can see the potential in this person. They will go on to great things. A budding actor. Blossom is very similar. Blossom usually is the flower on a tree, especially on a fruit tree. You have apple blossom, cherry blossom, very important in Japanese culture. But we can use it in a similar way to the budding actor. You could say, their friendship blossomed into romance. So it means to develop into something much greater, to blossom. And then we can talk about bearing fruit. To bear fruit can, in a metaphorical way, can be to have successful results. So you might say, years of hard work finally bore fruit. So the results were wonderful. Next, just to finish off here, we have seed, pip, and stone. Usually we use the word seed Seed is what you put in the ground when you want to grow some vegetables. For example, you buy some tomato seeds or something like that. Or flowers, you buy some seeds to put in your garden. You can also metaphorically plant the seed of an idea, something like that. So where something begins can also be the seed, metaphorically. We often talk about pips in fruit. So apples have pips and oranges have pips. When there's only one in the middle, it's called a stone. It's not a bone. So in plums, cherries, olives, they have stones. They don't have bones. Okay? So when there's only one, we call it a stone. Pips, there are several of them, like in an apple. Okay, so there's some interesting vocabulary, words and phrases which are connected to trees and plants. Why do all elephants have grey trunks? Because they are all in the same swimming club. So we have a few what's the differences for you again this week. Some of these you may have seen before. Some old favourites here. Shade and shadow we'll begin with. Shade and shadow. They are actually the same thing, but we use them in slightly different contexts. When you are avoiding the sun and there's a nice cool place to sit on a hot day, that is the shade. We like to sit in the shade in a shady corner where it's nice and cool. A shadow is merely the outline that is when you have the light behind you and you have like a dark shape on the floor. That is your shadow. But shade is normally used in a positive context when we're avoiding the sun. Translate, transport. Translate, the first one is to move from one language to another. So you get something in Spanish and you turn it into English. That is to translate. We don't use it in the sense of moving things physically from one place. That is to transport. And of course, transport, if I change the emphasis, transport, and put the stress on the first syllable, I can make a noun, transport. But transport is a verb. Bank and bench are another pair that are sometimes confused, generally because people forget the word bench and they use bank instead. So bank in English actually has two different meanings that I can think of. The first one is the place where you keep your money, where you go to do business transactions, I suppose. In theory, they look after your money. Sometimes they lend you money for a mortgage. So that is the bank, your Santander, or wherever you go. And there's also the bank of the river. So you might talk about the people on the South Bank or the North Bank. Or in some countries, they have a West Bank, don't they? In Palestine or somewhere like that, they talk about the West Bank. And of course, Paris has a famous South Bank area where all of the bohemian artist types hang out. So we have two banks, but don't use it when you mean bench. The thing you sit on in the park is a bench. The next one, well, it's a bit of a pronunciation one really, is sweatshop and sweet shop. I only put this because people get confused when they try to say sweat and they say sweet by accident. Sweat is what you do on a very hot day. It is the liquid that comes out of you to keep you cool. That is sweat and the verb to sweat. A sweatshop is actually like a factory in a very poor country where they employ a lot of women and children in very bad conditions. In Indonesia, for example, where they make your cheap clothes that you buy here in Europe. Those places are called sweatshops. A sweet shop is just a place where you go to buy your candy. That is a sweet shop. Nice old traditional places. I don't know if they exist anymore. Sweet shops. They used to be very popular places when I was young. Anyway, sweat is what you do on a hot day, and sweet is something with lots of sugar in it. The last one in this little group are sign and signal. When you are walking down the street and you see something written on a wall or telling you to do something or not to do something, that is probably a sign. Generally, we have road signs and signs in public places. Signals, you sometimes see them on the motorway or on a railway line. I think a signal would change. If you imagine those things on railway lines that tell the train whether it can go forward or whether it has to stop, that is a signal, and something can either move up or down, or the lights can change colour. Like a traffic light would be a signal, but a sign that just says stop is just a sign. So signs and signals, and note the pronunciation. Sign, you don't hear the G, sign. But in signal, it's a very different sound, signal. Okay, let's have a little bit of pronunciation. The topic of the week is nature. Nature. You notice how the A at the beginning is pronounced A, nay, not na, nay. And then the second syllable is just a ch. Nature. Nature. It's the same as future and culture and furniture. But not mature. Mature has the stress on the ch, so it's longer than it is in nature. Nature, future, culture have the stress at the beginning. So mature is a bit different, but they've all got a ch in the middle. Another one that was common this week is the U that's not pronounced in certain words, like build. Don't say build, not build, it's build. Just ignore the U completely. Build. Circuit, circuit, biscuit, biscuit. You see there's no U in there. Well, there is, but you can't hear it. Biscuit. And also words like guard, guard. The U doesn't do anything. Guard. The next one I've heard a few times recently, the word theatre. People don't know how to say theatre because of this, what looks like a tre at the end. It's not. It's not theatre. The RE is pronounced the same as the ER. So words like theatre, centre, liter, when you see the RE in British English, if you go to America, they write them ER, which is more representative of the pronunciation. So don't pronounce it RE. If you want to pronounce it, it's pronounced ER. And it's probably so you're not really pronouncing the R anyway. And often the stress is somewhere else. So if I say centre, it's just a little on the end. It's not really making much of a noise at all. But don't try to pronounce it as if it's RE. And one final one in the pronunciation is tired, tired. It's not tie and red, not tirade. It's tired. You don't hear the R in there at all. It's more of a diphthong sound in the middle. Tired and retired. I am retired. Okay, that's enough pronunciation. Now let's see what our celebrity guest speaker has to say on the topic of nature. Nature.
For thousands of years, people depended directly on nature for food, shelter, fuel, and survival. Today, most of us live in towns and cities, buying what we need from shops rather than growing or hunting it ourselves. Even so, many people still feel a strong connection with the natural world and enjoy escaping from urban life whenever they can. Country life is often seen through rose-colored glasses. Fresh air, peaceful surroundings, and beautiful scenery make villages seem like the perfect place to live. Yet the reality is often less romantic. Rural communities may have fewer jobs, limited public transport, and fewer services. For many, the countryside is better suited to weekends and holidays than everyday life. Ironically, one of the greatest threats to village life comes from the very people who admire it most. As more wealthy buyers purchase second homes, house prices rise beyond the reach of local families. Villages can gradually become quieter during the winter, with schools, shops, and pubs struggling to survive despite the attractive appearance of the area. Although fewer people now rely on nature for survival, many still seek ways to bring it into their lives. Gardens, balconies filled with flowers, houseplants, and pets all help people feel closer to the natural world. Even those living in busy cities often make space for something green inside or outside their homes. Research also suggests that spending time in nature has real benefits. Walking through a forest, sitting beside a river, or simply relaxing in a park can reduce stress, improve mood, and encourage physical activity. Green spaces have become increasingly valuable as cities grow larger and everyday life becomes faster and more demanding. This is perhaps why parks, rivers, and tree-lined streets often become the heart of urban life. They provide places to exercise, meet friends, play with children, or simply escape the noise for a while. Many of the world's most successful cities are those that have managed to preserve or create attractive natural spaces alongside modern development. Whether through a mountain walk, a city park, or simply watching birds in the garden, contact with nature continues to enrich our lives. It reminds us that there is more to life than traffic, deadlines, and screens. Although our dependence on nature has changed dramatically, our need to spend time in it seems as strong as ever.
Nature is sometimes not as clean as you would like it to be, and falling leaves can make a forest look rather untidy. It is tempting to give nature a hand by heading out to the forest at the weekend with your vacuum cleaner to help clean up the environment. However, using a vacuum cleaner in a forest causes irreparable damage, and in a few short years, the delicate ecosystem can be completely destroyed. Save the environment. Do not hoover the forest.
Only when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, and the last river poisoned, will we realize that we cannot eat money that is believed by many to be a quotation from a wise old Native American chief from the Cree tribe. Unfortunately, this quotation can only be traced back to a book from 1972, which is a bit disappointing, but as we've discussed before, what we believe to be true is often more important than the real truth. But it's a good quotation anyway. Well, that's all we have for this episode, and indeed that's all we have for this trimester. I might do another podcast during the summer holiday on the problems we have with pronunciation, and if not, I'll be working on the next book for the new trimester, which will begin in October. I've got a few ideas. Some of the book is prepared. We have memory, prejudice, time. We're even going to look at religion, which might be a difficult topic. We've also got other things such as relaxation and animal dilemmas coming up. So lots to look forward to in the next book. We'll also be having a reading discussion as well. The book for discussion, or rather the play for discussion, will be Pygmalion, or the musical My Fair Lady, depending which one you choose to look at. So that's coming up in the next trimester. I will, of course, be sending out emails and WhatsApp messages around September time, so that you can confirm your preferred day and time, and I can put the classes together, probably sticking to the same timetable as last trimester. So if I don't see you on Friday for the final classes, have a good summer, stay cool, and see you next time.